constantly sees exactly what everyone else misses. If you've ever been told you just have sharp intuition, or if you're the person who always notices the unspoken tension in a room, you already know that reading people perfectly isn't always the superpower it seems to be. In fact, it can feel like a pretty heavy burden. First things first, let's take that whole mystical, spiritual angle of intuition right off the table. What we're looking at here is hard science. There's no magic involved. Your brain is simply pulling off something extraordinary, and it's doing it way, way faster than the people around you.
So, here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the neuroscience of high perception, then walk through 3 common traps: the accidental villain, the detective loop, and the silent burden. Finally, we'll wrap up with how to actually master your perceptive mind.
Okay, part 1. The neuroscience of high perception. It really all comes down to a neurological mechanism known as thin slicing. You can kind of think of your brain as a 24/7 data collection machine. While most folks are relying heavily on the verbal channel, what's actually being said out loud, the perceptive brain is highly tuned to the nonverbal channel. It is constantly, automatically scanning for behavioral errors or any incongruence between a person's words and their body language. And just to give you an idea of how insanely fast this data collection is happening, let's look at what psychologist Dr. Paul Ekman calls microexpressions. These are tiny, involuntary facial movements that flash across someone's face in just 1/15th to 1/25th of a second. To put that into perspective for a second, a literal blink of an eye takes about 1/3 of a second. That means your brain is catching these microexpressions almost 10 times faster than a blink. There's absolutely no way to fake that. They reveal the true, hidden emotions someone is trying to mask. And your perceptive brain? It catches them instantly. To really picture how this works, imagine a theater. The average brain acts like a normal audience member, right? They're looking at the stage, totally bought in, believing everything the actors are saying. But the perceptive brain is playing a completely different game. While the play is happening, the perceptive mind is busy watching the velvet curtain behind the stage. It's noticing the broken props, spotting the prompter's hand, and seeing the nervous sweat on the actor's forehead. So, let's say a coworker tells you, "Oh, I'm so happy you got promoted." Well, your brain isn't just listening to the words. It notices that their voice just pitched up half a tone. It sees that their smile didn't quite reach the corners of their eyes, and it caught that rapid, fleeting flicker of jealousy. Instantly, an unconscious alert goes off in your head. Data error. The words and the body just don't match. It happens in an absolute flash, kind of like tasting overly salty soup. You don't have to sit there and overthink it. You just instantly know you don't want another bite. Your brain simply reports the absolute truth. Which brings us to part 2, and our first trap, the accidental villain.
If you know your Greek mythology, you might remember Cassandra. She was cursed to foresee the future and know the absolute truth, but doomed to never, ever be believed. Well, highly perceptive people are basically the Cassandras of modern social relationships. Human society practically runs on polite masks and shared performances just to function smoothly. So when you come along and shine a massive spotlight into the dark corners people are desperately trying to hide, you often end up becoming the bad guy in your own story.
Here's exactly how this plays out in the real world. Say you're looking at a dating app and someone is acting overly confident and super charming. You instantly thin slice the overcompensation and rushed manipulation. But when you point it out to your friends, the group reaction is usually, "Wow, you're just paranoid, stop ruining the happiness." Or, "Think about that crying coworker playing the victim." You can clearly see they're actually just missing deadlines and manipulating public opinion. But if you call it out, the group turns right on you. Exposing these hidden truths triggers intense ego defense and projection in other people. You don't earn their respect. Instead, you trigger their fear, and they attack you, labeling you as cold or arrogant. Now let's look at part 3, trap number 2, the detective loop. The crucial point here is to stop and ask yourself why you suddenly feel this intense need to analyze absolutely everything. Why does a totally simple compliment from your partner suddenly feel like a setup? Or why does a text reply that comes just 30 minutes late instantly get processed as emotional distance or a hidden threat? The psychological reality is that this constant, high-alert state is actually a defense mechanism. You start to believe that if you can just predict every single betrayal or disappointment before it happens, well then, you won't feel the pain. Your amazing sensitivity morphs into this heavy suit of armor to protect yourself. But here's the catch. That armor gets so incredibly heavy that it ends up blocking out all real emotion and innocent joy. And this traps you in a severe confirmation bias. Your brain starts aggressively filtering all incoming information just to prove your negative theories right, entirely ignoring the innocent present reality. It's honestly like having hearing so sensitive that you can hear the tiny microcracks in a building before it collapses. Sure, it absolutely keeps you alive, but it completely destroys your ability to just sit back and enjoy the music. Literally every sound becomes a threat.
Moving on to part 4 and our final trap, the silent burden.
This trap creates a really strange, profound kind of loneliness. It's not the loneliness of being physically alone in a room. No, it's the loneliness of standing at a doomed wedding, watching the forced smiles, knowing the marriage is built on quicksand, and still having to raise a glass to toast them. Or you're watching a coworker get manipulated, knowing full well that trying to step in and save them would only result in total denial. It's like knowing the Titanic is actively sinking, but having to stand there in first class and just watch everyone dance.
Because of this dynamic, you often become an incredible diplomat. You flawlessly read the needs of everyone else in the room before a single word is even spoken. You become the healer. But the trade-off, you become a glass wall. Everyone else just sees right through you, or they only see their own reflection. As a result, no one ever truly knows what you need, and no one sees where you are hurting.
All right, let's get into part 5, mastering your perceptive mind.
In therapeutic psychology, mastering your perceptive mind doesn't mean you just magically start seeing less. It means fundamentally changing how you respond to what you see. It requires you to build firm cognitive boundaries using 3 core survival principles. Let's break those down.
First up is strategic ignorance. You have to learn to separate the truth you see from your responsibility to act on it. Ask yourself, is it really your job to expose that fake coworker? Nope. You must learn to treat their fake behavior like a gray cloud passing across the sky. You observe it, sure, but you don't fly up there to try and push it away. You use your insight as a tool to protect yourself, but you deliberately leave behind the ego that wants to play the lord of absolute truth.
Principle 2 requires a massive shift in empathy. You simply have to accept social masks. People don't just wear masks to deceive. They usually wear them to hide their deep wounds, their insecurities, and their very real fear of not being loved. When your brain thin slices that the loud bragging guy at the party is really just an insecure boy craving attention, your disgust can actually fade into radical acceptance. You don't have to rip his mask off. You can kindly allow him to feel safe inside it.
And this radical empathy builds perfectly into our next concept. You actively shift from being this cold X-ray machine that aggressively exposes every single flaw in the room into a quiet lighthouse. You still see all the hidden rocks and dangerous currents out there. You always will. But instead of panicking or shouting and pointing them out to everyone else, you just calmly guide your own ship safely through the water.
Finally, principle 3. You absolutely must stop trying to control the future. If your intuition tells you there's a 20% chance someone might let you down, you have to accept that 20% risk so you can actually enjoy the 80% of joy right in front of you. You have to intentionally ignore some of the sharp thorns so your mind can rest and you can finally smell the rose. Living fully requires the courage to occasionally be vulnerable.
High perception and high-speed thin slicing is a brutal gift, but it is also an incredibly beautiful one once you set your boundaries. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really reflect on this. Which of these psychological traps has been holding you back the most? And what steps are you going to take today to stop being the